Hi, this is Joe Pyne. Wrestling's our first topic, and the action starts in just a moment.
Friends, you've heard about Culligan Saltwater Service. Maybe you've wondered how you get Culligan Saltwater Service. Well, here's how you get Culligan Saltwater Service. You call a Culligan man. Go on, call him.
Hey, Culligan man.
He'll tell you all about Culligan Saltwater Service.
Saltwater gets clothes cleaner, makes coffee and foods taste better, and makes housework easier, and like that.
And naturally, when you know how good it is, you say, all right.
All right.
So he installs his water softener outside your house. Then, in about a month or so, when that softener needs regenerating, he takes it off, and he puts a fresh one on again. So that every time you turn on the faucet, instead of getting nasty old hard water, you get lovely soft water. See, that's not hard. So why don't you call your Culligan man? Go and call him.
Hey, Culligan man.
See, that's not hard.
My guest today is Count Billy Varga, the heavyweight wrestling champion of America. Count, King, Prince, where do you fellas get these titles? Especially, where do you get yours?
Well, Joe, this thing is really legitimate. There are many wrestlers in the past that have used these sort of non-diplomes, I'd call them, or let's say an added attraction like Lord or Prince or even King. But Count Billy Varga is the only legitimate noble name in wrestling, in fact, in the sports field in America today. And if I look into the past, I'd even say covering the last 100 years.
Well, I could sit here and tell you that my real name is not Joe Pyne, but I just got a genealogy report from the Genealogy Institute in Chicago, and that I'm descended from the 9 famous Galcorn barons of Spain, and my original name was de Pinos. Would you believe that?
I would. I'll tell you why.
Then you're a kook.
I'll tell you why, Joe. That's possible, but I'm here with another one. Anyway, you know, in Hungary, the countships started around the 15th century. And they have sort of branched off into many, many families. They were derived by military service to the monarchy. And it wasn't too hard to come by if you had the financial means and you were sort of loyal to the monarch.
Well, what do you have to do with the 15th century? You're around today.
I said it started at the 15th century. In our family, it didn't start to 1870. And it became incorporated with the Varga name. And my father, naturally being a descendant of the other Vargas, he accepted the title in 1913.
It was pretty decent of him right there, wasn't it?
Well, with it went a legacy, a castle, a sort of a small castle. I've had some fans...
Are you going to tell me that you've got a castle in Hungary?
If you'll wait a moment, you'll hear.
I got to hear this.
I have had some fans, and I have to say this is sort of sour grapes, actually, that have sent me pictures of my castle. And it's odd. I have never seen a castle with a moon on the door. However, as that be it, that made it...
Yeah, that figures. That figures. Well, you know, you realize that you're violating the law, don't you?
Not actually, Joe. I tell you, I know what you're implying. You're implying that as an American citizen, you're not allowed to hold any title of a foreign country.
That's right.
But this is not true, or let's say maybe it is true, but not put into practice. We have Sir Douglas Fairbanks, Jr., we have Princess Grace Kelly.
Sir Douglas Fairbanks, Jr. doesn't live in this country.
I beg your pardon. He traverses between, or shall we say peregrinates between United States and England.
He's very peripatetic, right?
Right.
You're starting with me with the big words.
Fine.
Now, let me you can out-muscle me, but you're not going to outword me. I'm going to tell you that right now. But Douglas Fairbanks is a British subject.
All right. Is
Princess Grace is a subject of Monaco.
That's wonderful. Now tell me about the Kennedy that has accepted a princess title.
What Kennedy?
The sister of President Kennedy, the former President John Kennedy.
She doesn't live in this country.
But she's a princess.
But she doesn't live in this country.
You mean to tell me,
she's married to a foreign national.
Look, you're looking at me. You mean to tell me she hasn't been to the United States recently?
People are allowed to come here, and when they come here, for example, when the King of Greece came here, we didn't tell him he couldn't be a king. That doesn't mean that you can't visit.
Yes, but the Kennedys are American citizenship. They are American citizens, excuse me.
She is not entitled to her title when she comes here.
I could go on a long list of people that are American citizens and that have accepted titles, honorary sort of type thing. I go a step further. I am a true count. Count Billy Varga.
You're a count that counts, right?
Well, in a sense, if you want to put it in a vernacular.
What would you say if I told you that as soon as this program is over, we're going to start legal proceedings to remove your title? What do you think of that?
Joe, if you really meant it, you wouldn't leave the room.
You mean you would exert physical force on me?
No,
Now you'd be violating a second law because your hands are lethal weapons.
Joe, aren't you
under
assuming,
the law, right?
Aren't you assuming, Joe, did I say anything that I was going to attack you?
You implied
Not that
a
I may
threat.
not, but I tell you, what I was implying was I was going to convince you by showing you the various ways of showing that you can accept a title here in the United States, and it is not frowned upon. It is looked upon. In fact, the reigning head of the House of Habsburg now resides in San Francisco.
Well, we're going to get him out as soon as possible, too. Now, your second title, the heavyweight wrestling champion of America.
The world's greatest championship belt in existence. It is in value in excess of $10,000. Now, if you refute that or try to, I would like to put money on the table now.
Where would you be able to get $10,000 for your belt?
Well, if you want to start right with the two of us, I am a millionaire, so I could set up the $10,000 immediately.
You're a millionaire.
That's right.
You got to be a millionaire through wrestling or being a count?
Through wrestling, through being a count, and through wise investments.
Suppose you took that belt and you were impoverished. How much do you think that the pawn shop would give you for that belt?
First place, there are three angles you must look at on a championship belt. First, there is the honor, the intrinsic value. Second, there is the monetary value, the gold and the diamonds. There is an excess of 7 carats of diamonds in it. And thirdly, you take the drawing power of the American heavyweight champion, and you put the three together, and $10,000 is a paltry sum to ask for such a title and belt.
Well, aren't there some wrestlers who would disagree with you when you claim to be the heavyweight wrestling champion of America?
Joe, there is a great deal of confusion around the world's heavyweight championship.
There's more confusion about that than whether you're a count.
I agree. Actually, there are 5 world's championships in existence today. There is one in New York, one in Texas, one in Baltimore, one in Minneapolis, and we have one out here. But, Joe, when you take the American Heavyweight Championship and Count Billy Varga, you are looking at the one, the only, the world's greatest living wrestler today.
So there's a guy in New York saying the same thing, and there's one saying the same thing in Texas and elsewhere, right?
Well, Joe, actually, this is, I wouldn't refute this. I wouldn't say this is not possible. But he is definitely, as far as greatness is concerned, I have no contemporary within the last 100 years. In fact, my name, Count Billy Varga, is the only name in Valhalla, if you understand that, Joe.
I think that Haystack Calhoun could sit on you, and that would be the end of you.
Joe, I wrestled Haystack Calhoun 1 year ago at the Olympic Auditorium here in Los Angeles, and I defeated him 2 straight falls.
He must have had a head cold or something.
You know, it wasn't in his head.
How do you wrestle a man that weighs in the neighborhood of 600 pounds?
Actually, it's not as difficult as it might sound, Joe.
You grab him by his dungarees?
No, the fellow, this is something that probably people don't realize. Although he is a, what would you say, obese or rotund gentleman, he is very strong and very agile and surprisingly fast for his amount of weight. However, with all this, it wasn't enough to cope with Count Billy Varga, because there is one thing you can do. You use the leverages against his weight. In other words, if he's on the ground, it is difficult for him to rise. So you maintain that position with him if possible.
But if he's sitting on you, it's very difficult for you to rise, right?
Joe, there's one point. Stay out from beneath him.
But suppose he did get on you, fully on you. Would
With
you
the-
raise him?
I could, yes. I am that strong.
People are always talking about the fact that wrestling is not a sport, but an exhibition. Would you buy that?
No, I wouldn't. I'll tell you why, Joe. First place, the way you presented the question is improper. Wrestling, boxing, football, all sports are absolutely honest, absolutely legitimate, and they're the finest thing. I love sports, you understand. But if you were to rephrase that and say some of the participants in wrestling or boxing or football may say deviate from the honesty of the sport, this is possible.
Well, now, Count Billy Varga, are you going to sit there and tell me that you've never decided with the promoter and the other wrestler who wins tonight?
Actually, this is sort of a crude way of putting it, but let me rephrase it
All
and
right,
say
so
this.
I'm crude. You keep rephrasing my questions. Why don't you just answer them?
I have been asked on occasion, I imagine this is understandable. It would, if I would possibly see fit to let the gentleman look a little good, and even on occasion if it was possible for him to get his hand raised. But Joe, let me remind you, as the world's greatest wrestler, the answer was always a negative. I am undefeated since 1956, and that match that I lost, I was disqualified in 1956. I definitely refuse to take orders. Now, I don't say that this holds true with every individual, whether it's boxing, whether it's wrestling.
You know, one thing I remember reading about is the fact that some outraged fans attacked some wrestlers, and the story went like this. Being professional wrestlers and therefore unaccustomed to physical violence, they fled in terror. How does that grab you?
I don't know, Joe. It's sort of it's tongue-in-cheek in a sense. The fans are a peculiar lot. Now, I hate them, and then I love them, and I think the feeling is mutual.
Are you a guy that's booed a lot, or you cheered a lot? Are you the good guy or the bad guy?
Joe, I would say the cacophony of sound when I enter that squared circle, is something
circus,
deafening.
You said it. You made a Freudian slip when you enter the squared circus.
Well, no, I was thinking of this program here, but however, I'm going to try to continue on.
We'll be back with Count Billy Varga in just a moment.
They're renting money inside that door at your nearby Seaboard Money Store. They're lending money if you need more. See your nearby Seaboard Money Store.
1,762,397. 1,762,398. 1,762,000. One, two.
They're renting money inside that door at your nearby Seaboard Money Store. They're lending money if you need more. See your nearby Seaboard Money Store.
Count Billy Varga, heavyweight wrestling champion of America, is our guest today. And as he said, there are 4 other fellows claiming his title, but...
No, Joe. There's only 1 American heavyweight champion. There's 4 others claiming the world's title.
Oh, the world.
Yes.
I see. You don't go for the world title.
Actually, the American Heavyweight Championship belt is recognized throughout the world. I have defended it in Alaska, in the Hawaiian Islands, in Japan, in Mexico, in Canada. It is a world's title. However, the variation is that it is called the American Heavyweight Champion, whereas the other 5, not 4, Joe, are called world's titles, and they seem to tag on different organizations like that, NNW or the WWA or some ridiculous thing.
How would you stack up against, say, the Destroyer or the Zebra Kid?
I have wrestled both and defeated both. That should answer the question.
That answers the question. Have they ever defeated you?
No. As I repeated earlier, I haven't been defeated since 1956, and that was through a disqualification. Incidentally, you mentioned Freudian. I happen to be a student of Freud, Adler, Brewer, and Jung. And they sort of...
You mean Young?
Well, if you want it that way,
I think he would have preferred it that way.
They have a way of sort of isolating a man in his little location. In other words, there are the 3 types of man. There's the endomorph, the mesomorph, and the ectomorph. Now, I am a combination of the mesomorph and the ectomorph, which
no
is
question
brawn,
in my mind about
which
that.
is brawn and brain. And I'm not implying that you are the 3rd, which is the stomach, and, of course, fat and soft.
Well, you don't see anything fat about me.
Well, you are soft-looking.
Huh? Well, I'm not in there wrestling every night, so naturally I'm not going to be
Maybe you should try it,
bulging
Joe.
with muscles, but as I told you before, I'll go with you with
You're
words.
You're not smiling
anytime.
now, Joe.
I'll go with you with words anytime, right?
Right.
Huh?
All right.
Anytime you want. Anytime you want to exercise your proclivity to verbiage on this show, we'll go.
Joe, I congratulate you on that last sentence.
You like that one, huh?
Beautiful.
Now, what is there about wrestling that causes a lot of wrestlers to try to give people the impression they're so terribly cerebral?
Actually, Joe, a wrestler...
this is not unique with you, I get it from other wrestlers.
I understand.
Coming on with the big words all the time.
I understand. Well, as I told you, actually today, a wrestler is a combination of brawn and brain. And it has become a necessity. Joe, my father wrestled for 30 years before I did. And naturally, I'm not implying that he wasn't a very intelligent man because he was a college graduate in Europe. But the thing that when he arrived in the United States, he didn't rely too much on the mental aspect of it as far as investing and as far as taking care of his position in life.
He didn't become a millionaire as you have been.
He did. I would say that he made more money than I did. Tax-free in the 20s, which was a fantastic thing. He made $5,000 and $10,000 a week, but he didn't have the business acumen that was necessary to go with it. He thought sports was going to last forever, so he relied on the physical end.
I'm going to prove to you right now that you're engaged not in a sport, but in an exhibition. You want that proof right now?
Shoot.
In any sport where the outcome is in doubt, the bookmakers will engage in betting activity. You can't find a bookmaker in his right mind or any other bettor in his right mind that'll bet on a wrestling exhibition. Not only that, but in many states of the Union, you're not called a sport, you're called an exhibition, to wit, the state of Pennsylvania.
That is a misnomer and a travesty of justice. For one example, that big fight that they held in Miami between Cassius Clay and his opponent, the bookmakers only wish they hadn't taken the bet. Do you understand? And also,
I realize that's dank.
And
There's no
there
question
are
about it.
bookmakers that do take bets on wrestling. However,
Would you find me one, please?
I will. How much
you?
you want to bet? And always bet with Count Billy
All he
Varga,
can
because your
stand.
money will come back.
Well, I'll have to have a conversation with you about that, but I would.
I'm assuring you now, if Count Billy Varga wrestles and defends his American heavyweight title, your money is in the bank already.
Where can I find anybody crazy enough to join with me in a bet if I'm that dumb?
Joe, are you trying to push gambling, or are you trying to talk about wrestling?
No, but the point I'm trying to say is that if there's anything to the outcome, if there's anything in doubt about the outcome, and I don't think there is, you'll find people that'll wager. Now you might find a guy.
Joe, and I frown upon bookmakers and gambling, and I still say that there are bookmakers that will accept bets on anything.
You frown.
However,
you don't gamble.
Definitely not. And I'll tell you something,
You never go to
Joe.
the track or anything like that.
Oh yes, but I mean that's a $2 thing, and it's
You do
nothing
gamble.
of a large.
You do gamble. You go to Vegas, right?
I go to Vegas.
Vargas in Vegas. No, Vargan.
And actually, here's the point I was trying to bring out. People who have watched boxing and have watched wrestling and various other sports have come to realize there is showmanship in wrestling. No doubt about it. I mean, this is the extracurricular thing that people demand. It's like football in the 20s, Joe. What was football prior to Newt Rockney? It was the flying wedge, it was butting heads, it was just hitting lines.
I'll tell you something, Count, that I've never seen in my life in boxing, that I have seen in wrestling. A rehearsal.
Well, Joe, I'm going to have to call you a liar because I've been in the profession of wrestling. I'm not saying this is not possible, but I'm going to tell you something. I've been in wrestling professionally for 20-odd years. I have held the world's light heavyweight championship. I've held the world's junior heavyweight champion. And now I have the greatest title of them all, regardless of any of them, the American heavyweight championship. And I have never rehearsed a match. You know why?
I didn't say you did.
Just
I
a
didn't
moment.
say
Just
you
a
did.
I'm coming to a point on this, Joe.
All right.
To rehearse a match would take an Einstein. In other words, what you're implying is a man rehearses a match and goes out afterwards in front of the public and goes through each one of these holes. Now, this is practically impossible. A man would have to be a super genius.
9 years ago at a television channel in Hollywood, I saw a rehearsal.
Well, Joe, I again say that this is not impossible, but improbable. I mean, there are probably, let's say, boys in YMCAs or before a television show. Now they'll say, now go into this angle, be in this section of the ring. This is possible, yes.
Now, what
but I mean
about
in a real contest. That's what I'm saying.
what
Where
about some
the
of these
championship
things?
is up.
What's the name of the wrestler that has the manager that comes out with a cane, and then the wrestler does sort of a goose step around the ring? He's supposed to be a Prussian-type guy. What is his name, do you know?
There are several in that
This
category.
guy has a manager with a cane that comes out, and he takes the cane and he pokes into the opposing wrestler, and he makes a nuisance of himself. And then when the match starts and his man gets the opponent over near him, he'll take the cane and he'll stick it behind the guy's arms to hold him back, or he'll poke him with the cane. You know who I mean?
Really, I don't, Joe, but I know there are several that would fit that category. I can't deny that.
What I want to know is, why is it that the referee is always looking the other way for a while so that the bad guy can be very dirty? It looks so fraudulent. It's almost like, why can't he see what I'm seeing?
Well, Joe, this happens in most every field. I mean, there are things that occur that other people that are responsible seem not to notice. I mean, for instance, let's say, for instance, a doctor. Now, I don't know whether you know this, but in 38 states of the United States, fee splitting is not permitted.
I should hope not.
But it is prevalent, very prevalent in almost every state. And there are those that turn their eyes against. Now, I'm not trying to cast stones because I believe in the old axiom, when living in a glass house, don't. However, I could go into the lawyer's field, and I could point out cases of, well, look at the case in Dallas, Texas, Bert Ruby. Not that I'm castigating him. However, this was showmanship.
You mean Jack Ruby?
Jack Ruby. This was showmanship. This was done for a flair for the public consumption. And I don't think that this is really the right thing, because wrestling, regardless of what you say...
We'll just hold it right there for a moment. We'll be right back.
Autumn is the best time of all in flings.
Your feet want to fly.
In flings.
The styles tell you why.
In flings.
Shoes for the young and fair.
Shoes with a fall fashion flair.
Enjoy autumn more.
In flings.
You'll really adore.
New flings.
You'll flatter your feet.
Pamper your purse.
Set your heart aglow. Let yourself go, go, go. Everywhere in flings.
New flings have that fall fashion flair for every occasion, town, country, away, or at home. Flings set the fashion pace, $4.99 to $8.99. Nationally advertised flings at Kinney shoe stores.
Let yourself go, go, go. Everywhere in flings.
Yeah, Billy.
Well, regardless of what you say about wrestling, you can cast all the slurring remarks. It does not injure anybody bodily. It is a great panacea for people with pent-up emotions. Even Freud would agree with that, Joe.
You know, I'm not...
But, let me finish. When you
ahead.
go to the lawyers and the doctors, where it is a personal injury to a an individual, or say, let's even deviate from that. I don't want to attack them too strongly. If you go to, a politician, the one that promises you a chicken in every pot, and everybody's going to become a millionaire. Now, these things can cause injury to the mental stresses and the tempo that we live today, the freeways, the demands on everybody. But wrestling is just dead opposite. Although it has a tempo, and it does have its controversy, it is a great, and I repeat, a panacea for people. It is helpful, in other words.
Well, I just wanted to say that although I feel about wrestling that it's a show, I didn't mean to imply that I don't enjoy it, because heaven help me, I do. But that's because I enjoy a good show and I enjoy good professional performers. But there are some things about wrestling. For example, when a big brawny wrestler will come over to a little Mickey Mouse type wrestling announcer, and he'll pull his glasses off his head and throw them on the floor and grind them into the deck. Then I know that he and the announcer got together, and the announcer is wearing a pair of cheap glasses, and they thought that would be a clever trick. But to me, that demeans wrestling.
Joe, let me say that what you said has happened. I don't
You know
doubt
it's
it.
happened.
I know it's happened, but you've got the wrong idea of it. I mean, you don't have the entire story. I myself am guilty of such an infraction. However, it wasn't glasses. With Dick Lane, I presented him a robe, and I presented him with the idea that he would stop his annoyance as far as calling me Count Billy Varga. He just said it was impossible for him to call me Count, and it was just plain Billy Varga to him. So this particular evening, I devised this plan in my mind. I was going to try to cement relationship, and also to get one thing clarified, that it is Count Billy Varga.
So what happened?
So I presented the robe. And after I presented it to him and I told him why, he refused. Immediately I grabbed the robe behind his neck and gave it one jerk, and it was off of him in 3 pieces. Well, he became quite agitated, and he even swung at me. But let me say this,
And you
Joe.
fellas didn't have that cooked up?
Joe, he had no idea this was going to happen. I did. I knew from the moment that I went there, if he didn't accept it, I was going to rip it off of him. But he didn't know. However, Joe, let me paraphrase this. I know there are other incidents, possibly there was some inclination. But there are others that there aren't. There are 2 sides to the sword.
Now, Count Billy Varga, you don't wrestle in any particular kind of a costume, do you? And your hair is a normal length and so forth, and you look normal in every way.
Just a moment. I am also very handsome. Remember that.
Well, I think that's a matter of opinion. You look like a wrestler to me.
Do you see cauliflower ears?
No, I don't see cauliflower ears, but I see a guy who is a little muscle-bound between them.
I don't have to agree
Now,
to that.
you're not smiling so much,
Do
are
you?
you?
Well, this hurts. Do you see any teeth missing?
Huh? No, I don't see any teeth missing. I just hope they're yours.
Aren't they? Isn't the Countess a little bit on the pleasable side?
Oh, yeah, I think you're a nice fellow and all. You wouldn't win any prizes for beauty, I'll tell you that, on the boardwalk in Atlantic City. They'd look the
I have
other
to
way.
say that I feel you're alone on this.
Well, you probably get more TV exposure than I do, so I guess that should be the answer. Anyway, where do you head now? Now that you've got the Heavyweight Wrestling Championship of America, are you going after the World Championship,
Nope.
or are you going to try to milk this for a while?
Well, actually, Joe, I've been the American Heavyweight Champion since 1957. And
I think it's about time we had a new champion, don't you?
there are a lot of people that would like that, Joe. You're not alone. Even I'd have to agree that most of the fans, I would even go so far as to say 70% of the fans would really easily be glad to see me slip on that proverbial banana seed or banana peel and fall.
Well, Count Billy Varga, I want to thank you for being here. I don't know whether you'll be the heavyweight champion for long,
Joe,
but
the American
I'm going to see you.
Joe, the American Heavyweight Championship is twice as good as the world's title, and I wouldn't even seek it for under any circumstances.
Our thanks to Count Billy Varga, the heavyweight wrestling champion of America. This is Joe Pyne. We'll be back after station identification. During the next few minutes, if you should feel yourself going into a trance, rush to your telephone and call our guest, because he may be responsible for getting you out. Our guest is Major Arthur Lorimer Knight. Our subject is age regression through hypnosis. Major Knight is formerly with the Air Force for 5 years. He has practiced hypnotism in the Air Force for both entertainment and medical purposes. This gentleman has been working with hypnosis for 30 years. He is a graduate of North Dakota State and has done postgraduate work at Minnesota University. He is majored in psychology, and he happens to be possibly the leading researcher in age regression in the country. Now, regression, progression, these are things that we will be discussing on our program right now. Major Knight, what took you into the field of hypnosis? Are you particularly interested in the subconscious?
Very much so, especially after studying a lot of psychology. But when I was 12 years old, I saw a stage hypnotist do some work. Of course, this intrigues youngsters, and I went home and tried it myself. I copied his methods, and I had rather spectacular results, but things occurred that I wasn't prepared to handle, such as one boy crossing his eyes and a girl going into hysterics, and I couldn't get one to waken up for a while, so I finally decided to quit that and wait till I knew more about it. But when I got to college and majored in psychology, then some of my professors were writing books on the subject and wanted me to do some experiments with them, which I did for several years, and of course they got the credit, but I learned a good deal at the time, and became so interested then that later as a high school coach and athlete and so on, I use a good deal sometimes to keep my athletes eligible if they're having trouble with math or English, or if they were off in their game, it would sharpen them up considerably. And the same thing would apply to bowling and other forms of sports and various forms of concentration. But during the war, of course, I had a chance to use it in many ways, as you mentioned, in surgery, in amusement and entertainment, some research work. But age regression has been my hobby for a long time, and we might talk some about that as we go along.
Well, when you talk about age regression, I keep thinking in terms of people who claim to have taken people back to prenatal days. Can you make that claim?
This might have come from a study of Dianetics, which brought a lot of this sort of experience out in the open. And prenatal would imply a number of questions immediately. How could an embryo, for example, understand English, talk about things which they wouldn't be able to understand if the words were spoken before they were even born, and so on? This is a very controversial area, and we have one answer to it, that if you can hear that certain words are impressed in the mind in such a way that they can be played back as a tape recording would. And then later, when you understand what the words mean, you might then come to realize how you might have reacted way back in prenatal. This is such a controversial area.
An embryo could think.
Well, I kind of wonder. They go into the theory of cellular consciousness, that each cell somehow has a way of being impressed and recording these impressions, passing them on to later cells, which in turn somehow can be brought back through some type of regression. I'm not actually sold on this prenatal myself, but I've heard about it and studied it once upon a time in this work called Dianetics.
When you first began in your experiments with hypnosis, it was still considered in the realm of a black art, wasn't it?
Yes, it was.
Now today you have lived to see acceptance by such people as the late Pope, as a matter of fact.
That's right.
I think Pope John,
that's right,
on occasion said that he felt that hypnosis used in a proper fashion for a proper reason could now be recognized by the Roman Church.
That's correct. I had a case not long ago, one of the hospitals locally here, where the fellow needed hypnosis. Actually, it was a good subject, but he resisted it strongly, and I felt there must be an awfully good reason, which soon developed. After I'd left him, the priest came to visit him, and I heard him, as I went out the room, ask the priest about the ban by the Catholic Church on hypnosis, and the priest told him, well, this has been removed, that where the thing is medical, where the doctor okays it, and there's a good logical reason for it, it's perfectly all right. Well, the next time I worked with him, he didn't resist at all, and we prepared him for surgery, and he went through it just fine.
Major Knight, you're known as an honorable man, but what about some dishonorable people who possess the power to hypnotize? What could they not do to a person?
There's a sort of a rule of the thumb which says a person will not go against any deep-seated conviction. You couldn't make a Democrat out of a Republican. You couldn't even make a person sign a blank check if they felt they had money in the bank. And so normally it's impossible to go against a person's deep-seated conviction.
But you use the word normally, sir.
That's right.
But if you conditioned a person over a period of time, you could make a dishonest person steal, could you not?
If you justified it.
That's right. You by saying this person has just stolen from you, and you're actually going to be going and getting your money back.
Exactly. This is how come we can make a perfectly upright, outstanding citizen kill as he would in the war, because then it's justified, when normally his basic religious convictions would prohibit it completely. Still, if you justify it, even there he would kill, you see.
Well then, with this kind of background, how do we keep hypnosis from falling into the wrong hands?
Usually they say there's more danger to the hypnotist than there is to the subject, because most hypnotists are not clever enough to be able to pull anything and get by with it. Most of the subjects would immediately snap back and be infuriated or simply refuse to follow instructions. I would say that there's far more danger to the hypnotist than there is to the subject, because it would take an exceptionally clever hypnotist to be able to actually do any damage at all to the subject. However, I'll have to admit there are some exceptions where a person who is loosely knit anyhow in his personality has been accidentally placed into a situation which set off a traumatic experience early in life and caused a very severe reaction, which the hypnotist, who was not prepared psychologically to handle a situation like this, was utterly inadequate, and we had then would say we had problems and probably have to go to a psychologist to straighten it out.
Major Knight, why would anybody want to come to you and get themselves regressed?
Many reasons for this. Supposing this happened not long ago, a lady who got along fairly nicely with her husband, but they had they had folks come on over one evening, and they got to drinking, and her husband made her a little angry, and so as the drinks went on and she became more infuriated, finally there came a time after the party was over when, to show her resentment with her husband, she told him she had thrown all her jewelry away. Well, actually, she had hidden it various places, and yet in the morning when she sobered up, she couldn't remember where in the world she put it. And they hunted desperately all over for maybe half the day, and it wouldn't come back to her mind. She couldn't tell where it was. It was $7,500 worth of jewelry. This included watches, rings, a bracelet, a necklace, and a brooch, and so on. So finally they called me over to help her. Well, I simply hypnotized her, let her go back through age regression, through the experience during the time when she was hiding all this, and we found part of it in the swimming pool, part of it in some of the flower pots, part of it under a stone in the patio, and so on. And she never in the world would have remembered otherwise. This could happen to people who've had a large evening, say being drunk and didn't remember, and might have had an accident. Well, they can be regressed and tell you all about it.
Back in a moment with Major Knight.
The faucet says hot, but the water is not. Call your P-I-P-E plumber. When your hot water quits, just be calm, keep your wits. Call a P-I-P-E plumber. He'll install a new heater, quick as a wink, and the price will be unquestionably much lower than you think. When your water heater stops for a new one that is tops, call your P-I-P-E plumber. Call your P-I-P-E plumber. P-I-P-E means better plumbing. P-I-P-E means better plumbing. P-I-P-E means better plumbing. P-I-P-E means better plumbing. P-I-P-E.
This lady you were just describing did these things while intoxicated, sir.
Right.
How was she able to use her sober subconscious to concentrate on what she had done consciously while intoxicated?
Well, actually, when you get as many drinks as she had, I doubt if she was very conscious. She was pretty much subconscious in her manner of of acting and speaking and
that
so on.
That in itself is an interesting theory. In other words, do we revert to the
Very
subconscious
much
at
so.
the moment of intoxication?
Very much so.
Then a man who is little and normally meek and mild, who becomes belligerent at the time of intoxication, this would be his real self, eh?
This is called a submerged personality or a secondary personality. Sometimes a fellow who is meek and mild, when he's sober, get him drunk and he'll go around breaking light bulbs or picking a fight. Or some fellow who, when he's sober, is bashful and wouldn't ask a girl to dance, get him drunk and sure, or at least get him a few drinks, then he'll ask anyone to dance practically and have a grand time. So this is true that usually the subconscious is the inverse of the conscious mind.
Major Knight, suppose a man has a duodenal ulcer. He also is a heavy smoker. He suffers intensely from his duodenal ulcer. He cannot break his smoking habit. Could you help a man like that?
Yes, but you see, if he is smoking and using it as a crutch to lean upon, we know psychologically not to stop a habit abruptly, but to offer some substitute. And we could then tell him, if he's a good subject, not everyone is a good subject by any means, but if he's a good subject, we could tell him, well, for a while, you can get as much satisfaction from a substitute, such as gum or lifesavers or a piece of candy, some substitute, as you could from smoking. It'll give you as much of a lift as if you'd smoked, and we explain, well, after 10 days, you won't even need that because your system has gotten used to going without nicotine. Now, oftentimes an ulcer does result from forms of anxiety. People with heavy responsibilities worry a good deal. They don't show it outwardly, so they convert it. It's called a conversion symptom, and they get these ulcers. This isn't true in all cases, but where the person may have an anxiety background, hypnosis often can fortify the ego in such a way that his anxieties somewhat become subdued. He becomes more adequate in coping with the problem, and to whatever extent that ulcer may be caused by stress, if that stress is reduced, the ulcer begins to mend and heal and repair.
You know, this age regression that you specialize in can be a very useful tool, in my opinion, for future courtroom scenes. For example, there was a meeting that took place not long ago among some top-flight courtroom attorneys and judges and other interested parties, in which they prognosticated, and they claim that someday people will, instead of being sworn in, will be hypnotized and then regressed. What do you think about that? Is that a useful thing?
This is interesting. I've used it as an adjunct to some court cases. It's not allowed in court directly. It's considered a form of duress. However, if material that is achieved under hypnosis can be checked out, and the person has agreed to this in the first place, many times it can be very helpful. I've done this in a number of cases, and it has been very helpful.
Well, now, if you regress somebody back to age 8, will they write as a child, as we hear?
Yes, they will. In fact, they'll even take achievement tests and pass those tests on the exact level that they have been regressed to, 6 years old.
You mean to say that they will not be able to retain any of their adult wisdom and so forth?
Depends on the way you instruct them. If you say, now, you cannot remember things as you knew them on the adult level, if you preclude all of that, and if they're a very good subject, they'll go back and they'll be exactly 6. They wouldn't even understand large words in a vocabulary. They wouldn't be able to count past what a normal 6-year-older could do. Their writing is identical with their first grade work if you check back. And some of them couldn't even tie a double bow. And some, of course, write, say left-handed in the first grade and later changed over. Put them back to first grade and they write left-handed again.
Do you believe in your subject enough to bet $5,000, for example, on the word of somebody who is regressed by you as to a certain specific thing happening at a specific time?
This implies that a person under hypnosis will always tell the truth. Well, they won't. It depends a good deal on the stakes, on the amount of ego involved, but I've known many cases that'll lie under hypnosis.
Back in just a moment with Major Knight.
Here's Save-On's Radio Bargain of the Day. Only at Save-On drugstores, only today, Tuesday, only $12.88 for a portable tape recorder complete with a long playing reel of tape. And this 4-transistor Mayfair tape recorder carries Save-On's own guarantee. It's a lightweight 2.5 pounds, so it can be taken anywhere. It has a built-in speaker, and it's fully transistorized, and no tubes to replace ever. It's contained in a rugged plastic case with carrying strap. Only $12.88 at your neighborly Save-On drugstore, where you get blue-chip stamps, too, and where you can shop early or late, because Save-On is open 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day of the week.
Save on, save on. Join the Save On Hit Parade. It's fun to serve yourself and save at Save On Drugstore. Save On Drugstore. Save on!
You say you've known of many cases where people have lied under hypnosis, but isn't it a fact that the subject under hypnosis tends to attempt to please the hypnotist?
Oh, yes.
Isn't that what happened with Bridie Murphy?
Well, we have a very controversial area here again.
Indeed.
And I know Gina Sermonara very well, and her book, Many Mansions, goes into some of this work, and of course the Bridie Murphy case is quite generally publicized. And although a lot of people feel that the person who nowadays is one person, but who was Bridie Murphy in the other life was, we'll say, fabricating, I feel that she was not. I feel that she had a genuine psychic revelation. I do feel that only 3% of even good subjects are able to do this with any degree of validity. However, there is this 3% that are so valid in what they tell you that it does warrant considerable investigation and makes me wonder a good deal about this feeling, this theory of reincarnation. The more I do with it and research, the more convinced I get that there's a lot more to it than people generally accept.
Well, this is one of the troubles with you fellows who get involved with hypnosis. You begin to journey into the realm of the occult after a certain period.
Well, this is true, but one who's had a good background in psychology can explain these seeming age regressions past this life in 4 ways. One, a good subject, of course, as you mentioned, does try to please the hypnotist, even if they have to lie to do it. They feel this urge to comply, to do something. And if they're not capable of doing anything, through genuine talent, they'll lie. They'll come up with something that they just feel they have to say or do. Another type will believe what they've told you is true, and they're just fabricating, just a dream. And then another type will give you a submerged personality, such as we were mentioning when a person gets drunk, they change their personality. Some fellow might be masculine, really, in appearance, but very feminine in his subconscious nature. So you put him back to a previous life, almost invariably he's a woman. Or a very masculine woman in this life, put her back, she's a man. So you see, these experiences in regression aren't always valid. We can explain it psychologically. That they're
you make it seem as if some people are better off not knowing.
Well, that could be, definitely.
Well, now, do you meet people through doctors? Do you get calls from clinics, or how do you get to your subjects?
Yes, I'm pretty well known. I've lectured to all the service clubs in the Southland and, of course, all over the country. I've been on television and radio and been in it so long now that I never have to advertise. My work just sort of carries its own weight, and I'm so wrapped up in it, that's all I do. I have a full-time job in that sort of thing. And there's such a tremendous need for it, but I do feel that only people who do know psychology, have a good background in it, should work with it intensively.
That leads me up to my next question. I know a couple of very good stage hypnotists, such as Tryon Boyer and Pat Collins, people who appear in nightclubs. What is your feeling about them? Should they be taken off?
They seem to be very responsible people. They're mature. They have a certain amount of consideration for their subjects. They don't try to take advantage of them in any way. They don't try to get laughs to such an extent that the person is really mortified. But there are people who will do anything for a laugh or suggest most anything for a laugh, and that I can't go for.
Physically, what kind of people should not be hypnotized?
First of all, supposing the person has a bad heart, and the hypnotist doesn't know that, and the hypnotist has this person doing something such as playing cops and robbers, hide and go seek, or even say thinking he's standing on a precipice. They really got him on a chair, and they have a mattress on the floor, and they tell him that the wind is blowing, he's going to fall over the cliff. And this could happen. The person might actually fall thinking he's on a cliff, and if he's got a bad heart, this could actually bring on a heart attack, and has happened in one case that I heard about.
What is your feeling about the hypnotists who use such devices as neck pressure?
This is very bad. There's one right locally that I think you're aware of who had to give up his work because of this sort of thing. It's not genuine hypnosis at all. It's simply, as you know, putting pressure on the carotid arteries, causing the person to almost blank out, and just in that in-between stage.
Sort of a mild concussion, isn't it?
Yes, and it's dangerous. It's very dangerous. It's similar to what they do when they're wrestling. They call the sleeper holds.
Isn't this used by some faith healers we see on TV?
Well, I wondered about that.
When they say, heal this man, and they grab him, and it looks almost as if they're applying that well-known neck pressure, and they say, did you feel something go through you? Well, my goodness, the man had a concussion, a mild one. He felt something go through him, no question.
Well, that I've never seen except on television, so I wouldn't know personally, but I do feel that if the person who makes that suggestion is highly regarded and others have said that he could heal them, and the person up there to get a healing believes in him, the power of suggestion is terrific. And if this person is suggestible, and if the situation is a functional one, not organic, then he might actually seemingly get a healing. But if he had a broken arm and the problem is organic, and the healer tries to tell him that he is healed, I've never seen a case of broken arm healing instantaneously.
Major Knight, is the word stigmatist familiar to you?
Not exactly.
Have you heard of these people who suffer the stigmata, principally in Europe, and they bleed from the hands and that kind of thing?
Yes.
Are these people engaged in self-hypnosis?
I'm inclined to say yes, because some hypnotists have actually induced blisters on a person's arm or hand by telling them that they're pressing a hot iron on them. Really, it was a cold piece of metal or something, and the blister actually appeared.
Stay in that trance. We'll be back in a moment.
Now there are 7 ways Allstate good drivers may save money. At Allstate, good drivers save money on car insurance with Allstate's famous good driver rates. 8 out of 10 qualify. 2-car families may save extra money on both cars. If you're married between 21 and 25, you may save extra money with special rates for young marrieds. Compact car families may save extra money with Allstate's compact car discount. If you have a teenage boy who has completed an approved driver training course, you may save extra money at Allstate. If you're a lower mileage driver, you may save extra money at Allstate. And if you're buying a car, you may save extra money with Allstate's finance plan through a cooperating lender. See an Allstate agent. See how many of these 7 savings you qualify for. You're in good hands with Allstate.
Major Knight, is it true that a man can, through hypnosis, cause himself to be made sterile?
That I wouldn't know, although I would say it's possible to be made unable to perform, make him just feel that he can't perform as a man at all. And this, I know, on many occasions has actually happened.
Well, did you know that there are some interesting hypnosis textbooks on the subject of birth control through hypnosis? And
No.
I don't mean in the area that you just covered, but in actual mental sterility, which brings about physical sterility?
No, this is all new to me. It sounds interesting. I'd be a little skeptical personally because, again, it calls for an exceptionally good subject, and only 1 person in 5 is suggestible enough to achieve phenomena in the first place. But I'd like to research this area some. I'm not too sold on that. I'd say there's too much of a risk involved there.
What kind of people listening today on this program could be considered individuals who could use age regression, and for what kind of purposes would they want them?
Well, age regression, to illustrate the practical side of it, one time during the war, I had a young soldier who could not eat chicken. If he was fed chicken, he became violently ill. Well, we one time disguised some meat. It wasn't chicken. He thought it was, and he became ill. Then I knew very likely this had a functional origin, and I asked him if he wouldn't mind being hypnotized to see if we could help him. He agreed, and this is what happened. We discovered that at the age of 4, he'd been given a little chicken for Easter. About a year later, of course, he became very fond of this chicken. He felt as if it was a brother or sister. About a year later, they fed it to him, and he didn't know it was his rooster until they told him afterward. Well, he thought he felt like a cannibal, and he went into such a traumatic shock, he didn't eat for 3 days, and from that time on, chicken of any kind in his unconscious was always that dear little friend of his that he'd eaten, and he couldn't
You
adjust.
found out the reason. What was the cure?
First, he had to then, you see, it's like a boxer. If he sees a blow coming, there are things he'll do. He'll sidestep, duck, counterpunch. It's the one he doesn't see that knocks him out. So if you see the blow coming, then you square away and face it. And I explained this to him. From now on, you say, well, this isn't my dear little chicken at 4. I'm not 4 anymore.
I'm sorry, I've got to interrupt you, Major Knight. The chicken just came in and told me we're out of time. Thank you so much for being here, Major Arthur Knight, on the subject of hypnosis. This is Joe Pyne. Thank you for listening. This program came to you from Hollywood. This is a Heart West production.